Welcome back, viewers. Focus is on the big story. And exactly 30 days after the ill-fated Air India 171 crash took place, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has released a preliminary report detailing the crash, which remained largely inconclusive but did some major revelations. The crash report detailed that both the engines shut down within the seconds of the takeoff and that engine 1 and the engine 2 fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff within 1 second after each other. And according to the AAIB report, both engines of the ill-fated aircraft experienced a momentary recovery after an initial loss of the thrust, but ultimately failed to stabilize the crash. Then ultimately led to the deaths of over 260 people, and the AIB report, which had 15 pages of the long detail, also saying that the evidence that have been fetched from the site of the accident also said and pointed out that the wreckage site activities, including the drone, photography, videography, have been completed. The wreckage has been moved to a secure area near the airport, while CCTV footages also were given a specific record and a citation in that 15-page long report. Now, that was in fact after a month, while we got some understanding of what possibly did take place, as the fraction of seconds was enough to claim the lives of over 260 people. Now, joining me live on the telecast to share more details and to also put in perspective is former AAIB member, aviation safety expert and former military aviator, Captain Kishore Chinta. So thank you very much for joining me live. Appreciate you giving us your time. Now, the report is out, 15 pages long report. Everyone is talking about it, what would have happened and what were the reasons, how did it actually take place. What understanding do you make of this very report? How did you see when you read it? What was your first response? How were you able to absorb the details?
Okay, to start with, let's go over step by step. What exactly has been brought out. Okay, so what are the facts on record? For the purpose of the discussion, let's just list out the facts. Okay, the facts are both the engines were at takeoff for toga, that is fully forward power position till the point of impact. Both the pilots had about 60 hours of flying in the previous 1 month or so, 30 days. The PIC was the pilot monitoring for this flight, and the co-pilot was the pilot flying. And the additional advantage was the PIC was also a trainer captain on this aircraft, so there was additional expertise in this aircraft. From the startup of the engines to the point of Mayday call, it was 19 minutes based on the preliminary report and the timestamp. The aircraft had about 54 tons of fuel, close to max operating weight of this aircraft. Okay, so it was quite a full flight for a aircraft of its size. The aircraft takeoff roll was about 1 minute. Until this, everything was fine, both on the flight data recorder and as per the CCTV footage which is available. All functions were normal. About 3 to 4 seconds after takeoff is when both the engines started rolling back. The FCTM of the Boeing 787 states that in the event of any abnormal below 400 feet, you just climb to 400 feet before you even touch the checklist, only memory items. Okay. The preliminary report states that there was fuel starvation due to which the engines rolled back, which is attributable to the fuel control switches moving to cutoff position. Whether they were physically moved to the cutoff position or electronically they moved to cutoff position is not clear. The gap between the two switches moving from run to cutoff is 1 second, simultaneously one after the other. The one pilot asking the second pilot whether he switched off, and the other answering, no, I did not. We do not know which of the pilots asked this question and which of the pilots answered this. This is still ambiguous. The full CBR transcript is not part of the preliminary report. Both the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring had adequate hours on type. They had adequate rest. The ram air turbine started providing hydraulic power after about 8 seconds after takeoff. So after 10 seconds after both engines had lost power, the fuel control switches go from cut off to run as per the flight data recorder. Both the engines managed to relight. Engine 1 started to spool up and in the process of recovery when the aircraft impacted the ground. The report mentions speed and time, does not mention the altitude in respect to the timestamp. So in aviation, you can trade off, altitude for speed or vice versa. So we are dealing with limited information as far as the preliminary report is concerned. Now coming to the information available to us, what are the deductions we can make of it? The cockpit was not short of experience at all. Both the pilot and the co-pilot had adequate experience, and the PIC being on this aircraft added to the experience level. It's an added bonus. As per the SOP, if the P2 was the pilot flying, the throttle authority would have been with the PIC, who was the pilot monitoring. So it can be said that both the pilots were looking at the PFD and the engine parameters simultaneously. It is fuel flow was cut off to the engines, which resulted in the engines rolling back and not providing enough thrust for the aircraft to sustain flight. That has been established from the flight data recorder, and that's what the preliminary report says. The breakage states that the positions of the fuel control switches was to run from the pictures which are available from the crash site of the switch positions. So we do not have sufficient cause to believe that these switches were moved to cutoff position involuntarily, or whether there was a human element to move these switches deliberately from run to cutoff. There's nothing to indicate that this happened deliberately by the crew or any inadvertent action by the crew. The mere fact that the question, did you cut off, and no, I did not, is that it is proof that the pilots were caught by surprise. There is nothing in the Boeing 787 FCTM which tells the pilots that should they encounter a dual engine failure below 400 feet, what are the actions to take? At 400 feet, they would have probably recycled the fuel cutoff switches to cut off and then to on, which is memory items. So purely due to the experience of the PIC, we can probably, the only reason why they would have recycled those switches is they have seen that the engines were rolling back. As a last ditch attempt, they could have taken it to cut off and put it back. And that action has taken 4 seconds. So human interface took probably 4 seconds for both those switches to be recycled. Whereas the cutoff, as the preliminary report says, took only 1 second. It's humanly impossible for a pilot to lift them from the position where they are from run to take it to cut off both the switches within 1 second of each other. So the possibility of both the lock mechanism of both the switches, going bad or leading to the switches to cut off is highly improbable, and the probability is never 100% in aviation. Control switches moving uncommanded is still a mystery. The EFR, the electronic flight data recorder information is electronic, and it will give you position of the cutoff switch. It will give you position of the fuel shutoff valve, and a whole lot of other data, which will be detailed, and probably it will come out in the final report what were the exact causes for these switches to go from run to cutoff, and vice versa from cutoff to run.
Right,
So
sir.
I'm
So,
sure there would have been an exercise in the simulator to see how much time it would actually take if there was a human element to deliberately move them from run to cutoff within 1 second of each other. So the preliminary report does not also clarify if the movement of the switches was commanded or uncommanded. This will be clarified or in the coming months or weeks when the final report comes. So right now, the entire focus and speculation on this topic only gives us more conspiracy theories. Investigation at this point should also look at the software angle, because the electronic engine control is basically controlled by a software. These switches are basically providing a signal to the EECs, which will provide a further signal to the fuel control unit, which will provide a further signal to the fuel shutoff valves in the sequence of chain of events. So the primary focus on just the switches being the point of failure, may not be correct at this point of time. A whole lot of experts have been trying to portion the blame on the pilots that they deliberately cut off the engines, which is absurd to me. The software angle needs to be looked into. That they would have probably played a role in stopping the fuel flow to the pumps. Can the software be tampered with, or a bug inserted into the fuel cutoff switches to go to cutoff without physically moving the switches to cutoff? Cannot be ruled out. We do not know whether it could have happened. Is there a human element while the aircraft was on ground during the turnaround where such a bug could have been put into the system? Cannot be ruled out. I'm sure these angles will be looked into by the AAIB and investigated upon. So this is what we can look at as a gist of the preliminary report at this point of time. Unfortunately, the preliminary report gives us very selected information. It gives us the timestamp of the flight data recorder information in bits and pieces, but does not give us a timestamp on the cockpit voice recorder at the same time, at those particular times when it says at so and so time the fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff. We do not know what was the cockpit voice recorder recording at that particular point of time. It does state that at a particular point of time, the Mayday call was given, and the pilots asked each other some question. We do not know the timestamp or the further interaction on the cockpit voice recorder. All these aspects would give us a little more insight on what exactly happened in the cockpit and what was the exchange of communication between both the pilots, whether it was commanded that the switches move from cutoff to run, or they continue to be in run position, and the automatic relight sequence was initiated by the FADEC as it would have done. But similarly, the RAT was deployed and the APU start sequence was activated. All these actions are automatic and don't need any pilot inputs. So a lot is still in the dark from the preliminary report. A lot needs to be investigated upon and further deliberated upon.
Well, absolutely, sir. As in fact, you also have been a member of the AAIB. And all these notable points that you have very well structured in your statement so far are also giving out a very detailed understanding of all the data that has been compiled after the report is out. So, as one of the members of the AAIB, which is the body that has also investigated and prepared this report. What are the next stages that we speak of the investigation, and how do we also understand and expect the investigation to now focus at as more of these questions are also emerging, which are making the entire report even more questionable?
So now each aspect of the investigation will be divided. The pilot actions would assist along with a subject matter expert, which they probably will have a type qualified pilot who will assist the pilot actions vis-a-vis the laid down SOPs on what are the actions to be taken in case of an abnormal situation like this, vis-a-vis the flight crew FCTM of the Boeing 787, the airline SOPs, and all other aspects will be viewed upon. The operations aspects will be looked upon. The aeromedical aspects will be looked upon, whether the pilots had adequate rest or they fatigued, all those will be looked upon. The engineering aspects will be looked upon, airworthiness, why the throttle quadrant was changed in 2019, thereafter 2023, were there any defects or it was a routine change? All those aspects will be more deeply investigated upon. The human aspects, there will be statements taken from eyewitnesses and analyzed along with the other data available. The postmortem aspects will be taken into account on all the injuries on each and every body which was recovered from the crash site. All these aspects will now be collated and correlated to each other to arrive at something called circumstances leading to this accident, followed by probable causes which led to this accident, and finally summarizing in terms of safety recommendations to the airport operator, the airline, the engine manufacturer, the aircraft manufacturer, or anyone else who's a stakeholder. This will be the flow of information.
Well, all right. In fact, sir, as more details that are being shared by you, as given more perspective in this entire discourse, what is also an important question is to understand, and to understand that what stage is currently the investigation is standing at. Can the question and the angle of sabotage be also ruled out at this point of time, or there is still some space for the sabotage to be also investigated further?
As of now, I don't think we can rule out the sabotage angle. That is my personal viewpoint. The AAIB team may have a contrary viewpoint. But if you ask me on a personal basis, in the modern era, can the software be tampered with? I don't think that cannot be ruled out at this point. The aspects of the switches moving, being activated without a human element attached to it cannot be ruled out. So these are aspects which fall under conspiracy stroke sabotage angle, which I don't really want to dwell upon, this is for the AIB along with probably higher echelons of the intelligence aspects who would dwell upon this. But I personally feel it cannot be ruled out.
Okay, okay. As we understand that there is still some space there and left for the investigating committees and also the groups to look into the angle of sabotage further. What we also want to know, as per the understanding that we could gather by speaking to you on this, is what do you make of the Western media blaming the pilots for the crash? as in the report as well, the 15-page long report also mentions the two sentences of the conversation that has happened between the pilot and the co-pilot. And there has been the entire discourse and of course the dialogues have happened over how this crash could have been possibly a mistake on the pilot's and co-pilot's part. Do you think the Western media is only extrapolating this very evidence that has been quoted as a part of the evidence in the report by making the entire angle of blaming the pilot rather than the manufacturer of the Boeing, or the questions that are still to be raised in a very legitimate manner?
This this should be condoned totally. In fact, I believe that the AIB should issue a statement saying that at no point of time does the preliminary report apportion any blame on anyone. The primary objective of the AIB is not to apportion blame. You know, that's written in the ICAO Annexure 13. Their job is not to blame anyone. Their job is to find out the probable causes of the accident and safety recommendations. The foreign media seem to be on a witch hunt. They seem to be apportioning blame towards the pilot. We've had someone, I've heard a very seasoned aviator, Indian aviator, stating that pilot would have probably deliberately turned off those switches trying to crash the aircraft due to psychological reasons or fatigue or some other aspect like that. All this should be totally rubbished, and we should wait for the final report for probable causes towards this accident.
Well, all right, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us live on the broadcast. And Mr. Kishore, thank you for also sharing all these insights in such a detailed manner. Appreciate you also giving us your time on the same and decoding it for us, which remembers viewers, importantly holds the focus at this point of time for holding further discussions and also negotiations on what could possibly be the cause of the ill-fated crash. Now, viewers, on that note, with more news and updates on the other side, stay tuned. It's time to slip into a short break.